From the very early stage, I set this dream to make China good, to continue to be very interested in the United States of America, and try to bring the two countries together.
Mr. Tung, it's a pleasure and an honor to speak with you. For over half of your life, you have chosen to work towards a U.S. China relationship that will shape the world for the better. Why have you given so much of your life to this?
My life was very much influenced by my late father. The year before the graduation from the university in the United Kingdom, my father came over to the UK, had a talk to me, and talking about basically what do I intend to do after graduation. And I said, well, let me learn about business. So I joined a business firm. I will learn how to run business, and I come home and help you, and so on. And he said, no. So I said, why? He said, do you not know that there is the United States of America? This nation is the future. If you want to have a future, if I were you, I'd grab your bag and fly to America. He's a very thoughtful man and somebody who's always looking at the future. So I took this advice and I flew to the United States. And that has to be the beginning of my involvement in U.S. China relations, because I spent 9 years in the United States. I've learned a lot. I really see what the nation building is all about. And I felt, wow, if U.S. and China, the two of them, get together, and especially China is my home country, of course, it would be good for China. It would be good for the U.S. And I sincerely believe it's good for the world at large. So from the very early stage, I set this dream, to make China good, to continue to be very interested in the United States of America, and try to bring the two countries together.
As you said, your father gave you some advice. You listened to him. You went to America. You have a very special relationship with America and the American people, because in your 20s, you lived there,
yes.
You worked there,
yes.
You married there,
yeah.
You started a family there.
Yeah.
What's a favorite memory from those early years?
It's a good country to live in. It's also a country where you are given plenty of opportunities on the business side. So you are there to learn, you are there to create wealth, and there's very good friends. Whether it's the neighborhood or whether it's business contacts, and the way Americans, they respond, I think there are a decent lot of people there. It was wonderful. I remember going to a Giant Stadium to watch the New York Giants to play against the Green Bay Packers. These were big games. At the beginning, I didn't have a clue what was it all about, because the football and soccer is very different. In Hong Kong, in England, we play soccer. In the beginning, you can't get used to it because it's so cold in the winter, you see. So my friend who took me with him, he brought a bottle of whiskey. Keep on giving me whiskey, say, keep it warm, keep it warm. That was how I learned about American way, and for that matter, I become quite a fan of American football.
Do you think that the United States and China will be able to find a way past their current difficulties and find a way forward where everybody will win?
China, we have to understand American people a lot more. And American people need to spend time to understand Chinese people a lot more. Because understanding of the people of the two countries will make the politics so much easier. There are 300,000 Chinese students studying in America. Can you imagine so many Chinese families trusted the American education to let them to come to America to learn? That is a wonderful thing.
We want all the people that want to come over from China. We have the greatest university system in the world. We have incredible talent coming in from China. They occupy a big space in our universities, and we want to keep it that way.
And Chinese people are learning to speak English. Why? Because the families and they themselves think this is an important thing. You know, I would hope there'll be a lot more Americans would want to learn Chinese, because that could be helpful. New York University has a huge presence, a successful presence in Shanghai. Johns Hopkins has a presence in Nanjing University. It's not very large, but it's very good. And University of Chicago, they are now in Hong Kong. All these things actually helps the relationship. And the important thing is that make sure it can continue.
You talked earlier about trust. Mr. Tung, we live today in a world where nationalism and inward thinking are both on the rise. In that climate, how do you restore trust? How do you even build trust?
I think it's important to have an open mind, to understand the history on the other side, to understand what you are trying to get at. Can I be helpful? Can I also tell you you may be on the wrong track? And it's just coming together, talking to each other all the time. This morning I was on the telephone to the United States about 4 or 5 times, talking to my friends, worrying about different things. And we're just good friends. We just talk about it. What shall we do? And so on and so forth. So it's just a way that we communicate with each other, that we commit ourselves to this cause. And I think, you know, Chinese people and American people, they're decent. They want a better life. And working together, we can have a much better life. Because of the coming together, United States at the end was able to win the Cold War, was able to win the Cold War. When you win the Cold War, you become totally dominant as the most powerful nation on earth.
Then something huge happened in 1972 when Richard Nixon went to Beijing to meet with Mao Zedong. What do you think is the lasting legacy from this event?
I remember I was in the United Kingdom that day visiting, and I saw it in the newspaper. Oh, what is this all about? And of course, it was a huge breakthrough. But it actually is a huge breakthrough for China and for the United States also. And it's very interesting if you begin to read the communique which was issued after the meetings between President Nixon and Chairman Mao. The meeting was actually organized by Premier Chou En-lai and Henry Kissinger. But it's interesting, it was a 4-page communique talking about the two countries are very different, but also made the point that the two countries are faced with a hegemonic power who is a threat to the two countries and to others also. That's how China and U.S. actually come together. Now, if you think about it, people always say, well, U.S. China coming together, well, you guys are, you Chinese are clever, you take all the advantage and so on and so forth. But let me tell you this. Actually, if you think about it, because of the coming together, United States at the end was able to win the Cold War, Winning the Cold War, together with the way the United States actually organized the post-Second World War governance of the world, whether it's about the dominance of the US dollars or the United Nations or the intellectual monetary structure and so on. They all organized actually in favor of United States. When you win the Cold War, you become totally dominant as the most powerful nation on earth. And think about it, how much benefit America actually received as a result of this.
So there was Nixon in 1972, then we go another 7 years, it took another 7 years before Jimmy Carter and Deng Xiaoping re-established the formal diplomatic relationship. And meanwhile, China was opening up to itself and also to the world. Were these two events coincidental in terms of timing?
You can say it's coincidental, but you can also say these statesmen, they plan every step, they think every step through, and that coming together is just as important as the first one. And the reason why is this. In 1978, when this happened, China just went through the Cultural Revolution when the country is basically in a terrible shape. Deng Xiaoping became the leader of China. And he said, we have to get China going again. And the only way we're going to get it going is through reform and opening up. When asked, what does it mean? Why reform? Well, because it's not working. So we have to reform and make sure that things will all be working. And he always made the point, it's working for the people. Working for the people. And then he also talked about opening up. Why? Because after the Second World War, many other nations, defeated nations, they have been able to make huge progress in their economic development also. And of course, there are countries like United States, they're doing well. Where is China? We have to open up. We have to learn from all the countries who have been successful and see where can we go. That's what reform and opening up has come about. But he has a singular wisdom. He is enormous. The first day he was talking about revamping, rebuilding all the universities that was not working at that time, because he recognized without quality people, you are not going to build the nation. On the first day he did that almost. And then very soon after this, he said, we have to groom scientists, engineers, and really people that are smart to rebuild the nation. Nation building with reform and opening up is the thing. And when United States and China come together 7 years ago, but at that time, it was possible for US to begin opening up the market for China. Many American business also see the potential for them to get involved in the Chinese market. So it was a win-win for everybody. But for China, it was really important, And so reform and opening up just went forward. 40 years later, what happened to China? It became the second largest economy in the world. And China took off. Eventually, they were able to revitalize the global economy. We have to make sure that this has to be confronted together.
China has transformed, and we also keep hearing that the U.S. China relationship has transformed in those 4 decades. But what exactly has changed, do you think?
It is changed only because the people in the leadership position understand that together we'll be better off than confronting each other. Now, let me give you examples of this. In 2008, there was a global financial crisis. At that time, President George W. Bush was in the White House. He wanted to gather the countries around the world to come to Washington to talk about the difficulties the world is facing because of the financial crisis. By that time, the United States have already committed to stimulate its own economy. Because if the American economy starts moving again, the rest of the world will benefit. But he figured it's not enough. So he telephoned Mr. Wu Jintao, the president of China by then, and Wu Jintao actually flew over to Washington at his suggestion and joined together. China agreed to put up $400 billion of US dollars in an effort to actually to invest in China to get Chinese economy going again. So the economy can then, Chinese economy, when they are active, they can help all the other countries. So America and China both together doing these things, eventually they were able to revitalize the global economy. Now, that's a good example of the two guys coming together. They deliberately came together. They make things happen. And if it's only one country doing it, I think would have been very tough.
You've given the example of the global financial crisis in 2008. Are there other examples where the two countries got together, worked together, and collaborated?
A few years later, Mr. Obama and Mr. Xi Jinping came together and said, climate change, we have to make sure that this has to be confronted together. Mr. Obama's strength is on the developed nations, but China's strength is on the developing nations. But China by then was already studying the renewable energies, and the success of renewable energy is really important to the whole scheme of our climate change fight. And so the two agreed to work together and went to Paris and persuaded all the nations there to come together, sign the paper, and hence we were able to do this thing, fighting this climate change.
The US and China relationship has grown and expanded in the 40 years. Do they enjoy a complementary dynamic?
Very soon after that, there was the Ebola disease in West Africa. And they again came together with the World Health Organization, and they eventually were able to sort it out. So all I'm trying to say is that think about the two countries working together. and think about what other things we can do together. There's migration of people from Africa to Europe, from South America to United States of America. That's because of poverty issues in Africa and also South America and Central America. And there are also migration because of war, Middle East war problem. China has reasonable amount of activities, economic activities in Africa. Now, if they can help to accelerate the health of the economy in these African nations, and they are growing at 7% and so on and so forth, people do not want to move away from their home to find another country to go to, because they like to stay home, but provided there is a life, there is a future. And then there are all the other examples where we can work together, whether it's about, exploring the ocean, exploring the outer space. With the big data, with AI, the unemployment issue is going to be really a very big challenge for everybody. How we need to be ready for the future.
Mr. Tung, let's talk about trade and economy, because for many years, this was seen as the connecting points for the United States and China, and also as a way to stabilize the bilateral. Is that the same case today?
I think trade is a very important element for the United States, but also for China. We should look at its complementarity. It helps both, and we should nurture it, we should work at it, and both will benefit.
It's often said in the United States that China's market is not open to the world. Do you agree?
No, I don't agree. 2018, end of 2018, there are 68,000 American companies in China. 68,000 American companies. They manufacture there, then they sell the product there. In that year, for instance, I think the total sale was $680 billion. It's a huge number, okay? American people is always talking about the deficit of trade. And the deficit is about $350 billion. Hey, where does this number surface? The market is not open. You won't have 68,000 firms there.
Many people in the United States say that because of this trade relationship, ordinary Americans have lost their valuable jobs. And as such, their families, their communities are all impacted. What do you say to that?
There's always a discussion. How many jobs is lost in the United States of America because of U.S. China trade? And the number that thrown about is 2.4 million job lost in America. But many, many specialists in the United States and also from the universities have said that about 85% of the job losses came from robotics, automation, with the big data, with AI. The unemployment issue is going to be really a very big challenge for everybody. So we should focus on that. How are they going to create efficiency, but also how are they going to create, they can be destructive in the job markets, or how we need to be ready for the future. But on the other hand, American export to China creates jobs. So does the tourism that comes from China to America. So does when Chinese companies invest, job is created. And also the 300,000 students who are now studying there, they also actually create job opportunities. So when you add all these things together, the total job created is over 2 million jobs every year. It's not a whole lot, but the important thing is that it's not a small number either.
China is becoming the world's largest consumer market. Before you were in politics, you were in business, you were a business leader yourself. Are there opportunities ahead for people who are not Chinese in China?
The growth of the Chinese economy surprises a lot of people. It surprised me too. We always talk about the United States is the biggest consumer market in the world. Actually, at the end of this year, the Chinese consumer market will become the largest in the world. The number is like this, it's moving in that direction. But, well, why not? Because they have 1.4 billion people, four times more than America in terms of population. So the market is very, very big. And that's why there's 68,000 companies there doing things, you know. So that's where the complementarity comes, you see. You want to export, you can export. You want to import, you can import. And because China is big enough to do many of these things. And what we need to be doing is the two countries need to be working together. China is a peaceful nation. The people is not hegemonic. The country is not hegemonic. But the Chinese people deserve better lives.
You talked earlier about the financial crisis, about Ebola, about climate change, about space, about the oceans. Would you similarly say that even in trade and the economy, even at this difficult time, that the United States and China also fit well together?
But the fact is that the only way this relationship will survive is if we understand each other. You know, that sometimes I win some, sometimes you win some. And in the case of trade relationship, I think this is entirely possible. And there are things which is difficult. For instance, intellectual property. You know, it's really a difficult one because America, a whole lot of American people really believe China steals the American intellectual property on and on and on, and still doing these things. But on this particular issue, for instance, I would say this, that 1978 up to the early 80s and so on and so forth, when China was beginning to recover from the Cultural Revolution, at that time, I do believe there will be a lot of intellectual property violation. But today, when millions of Chinese are graduating in the universities, the scientists and the engineers, and millions of specialists and so on and so forth, they are on their own. They're really emerging as a very competent people in their areas of expertise. China is now really improving on the court system, on the legal system, in part because responding to international criticism, but also in part because there's a whole lot of people who are now in China who are now creating all these science and technology inventions and so on. They need to be protected also. So there are about now 15 or so courts which is involved just specially for intellectual property protection. I hope I'm right, and I believe I'm right, because the trust needs to be restored, you know, so the relationship can move forward again.
Mr. Tung, everybody will want to know then, has China changed in terms of its approach to the protection of intellectual property rights and how it works with its partners?
one or two areas you will see the big change. In other words, firstly is that on the question of filing of the patents, there is now a huge filing, made by the Chinese. And then the other is really paying the royalty for the use of intellectual property. China paid $8.6 billion. So, they're paying it to buy the intellectual property. And these are all records, you see. So there's a huge improvement that's going on. The society, the country, the legal system all begin to understand how important it is to move intellectual property forward. So my suggestion is that, yes, we still have to be vigilant, but let that not be in the way of a better U.S. China science and technology relationship.
Should the world be worried about a China that has less poverty, that is more growth, and one that in the future will become a developed country itself?
For China, our total per capita at this moment is only $10,000 per capita. And yes, China is the second largest economy in the world, but you divide that by 1.4 billion population, you come out that kind of a number. What China aspires to, not only working very hard in the eradication of poverty, not only working very hard in trying to get the environmental right, get the climate change right. Chinese people want to live a better life. And Chinese people also want to join the ranks of the developed nation. One day, $10,000 or $9,999 is not a developed nation. Chinese people, a few hundred years ago in the Tang Dynasty, they had 30% of the GDP of the world. But China never sought to conquer other places. China would not do that. China is a peaceful nation. The people is not hegemonic. The country is not hegemonic. But the Chinese people deserve better lives. For China, they want to see peace. But more than that, they want to build a world with other countries together, that we share the common destiny in peace, in friendship.
Mr. Tung, you were born in Shanghai on July 7th, 1937, the same day that Japan invaded China. Has this given you a unique insight into peace or even the absence of peace?
I was born on the day the Japanese formally invaded China, which was 1937, July 7th. So all my life, my family folks make sure I remember this. I, of course, constantly remember what's it all about. I've seen many wars. War cannot solve problems. It creates more problems subsequently, actually. But the ability to working together, if the two countries getting together, to work on it, or through the United Nations, we can make the world so much better. Wars can be avoided. What Chinese people have went through from the Opium War until today, what China has went through in war, in being occupied, and then eventually, it was not until 1949, you find your own way forward now, and we are moving forward very well. And we are moving forward not for any other things, but to build a better life for Chinese people, but also to make the world better. If the world is better, it will be good for China also. And similarly, if U.S. China can work together, it will be good for China, good for the United States, it will be good for the world. And I told my family that if I have to crawl, I would do it every day of my life to make U.S. China better.
So in that context, what does China really want?
China has suffered a great deal for hundreds of years because of the invasion of foreign forces into China. For China, they want to see peace, but more than that, they want to build a world with other countries together that we share the common destiny in peace, in friendship.
President Carter says that since 1979, when the diplomatic relationship was established, no American soldier has died on a battlefield in East Asia. Do you therefore think that the U.S.-China relationship can be that key to global peace?
I think U.S.-China relationship is a key to global peace. Not only we can avoid wars, we can make peace. We can make the world a better place to live.
My last question will be about the global future, a stronger, safer, more peaceful global future. You've worked in this relationship for the largest part of your life. What would you tell about the young people today about doing the same as you do?
To all the young people, better future is waiting for you, but it's not going to come to you. You have to get there. How do you get there? How do you equip yourself? How can you become somebody who is more idealistic, try to achieve good things in life for yourself and for everybody else? The future is better than today. And that is what they have to understand. But a better future doesn't come automatically. We all have to work for it. And we can work for it.
Mr. Tung Chee-hwa, thank you very much for your time and for sharing all of your insights.
No, thank you very much. Thank you.